Corsica is an island in the Mediterranean Sea belonging to France. It is located west of the Italian peninsula, southeast of the French mainland, and north of the Italian island of Sardinia. Mountains make up two-thirds of the island, forming a single chain. Corsica is one of the 27 regions of France, although it is designated as a territorial collectivity by law. As a territorial collectivity, Corsica enjoys some greater powers than other French regions, but is referred to as a region in common speech and is almost always listed among them. The island formed a single department until it was split in 1975 into two departments, Haute-Corse and Corse du Sud, with its regional capital in Ajaccio, the prefecture city of Corse du Sud. Bastia, the prefecture city of Haute-Corse, is the second largest settlement in Corsica, after being ruled by the Republic of Genoa since 1284. Corsica was briefly an independent Corsican republic from 1755 until it was annexed by France in 1769. Due to Corsica's historical ties with the Italian peninsula, the island retains to this day many elements of Italian culture. The native Corsican language, whose northern variant is closely related to Tuscan, is recognized as a regional language by the French government. This Mediterranean island was ruled by various nations over the course of history, but had several brief periods of independence. Emperor Napoleon I of France was born in 1769 in the Corsican capital of Ajaccio. His ancestral home, Casa Buonaparte, is today used as a museum. History. Prehistory and ancient age. The origin of the name Corsica is subject to much debate and remains a mystery. To the ancient Greeks it was known as Callister, Corsis, Cyanos, Cernilis, or Cerne. The latter Greek names are based on the Phoenician word for peninsula. Corsica has been occupied continuously since the Mesolithic era. It acquired an indigenous population that was influential in the Mediterranean during its long prehistory. After a brief occupation by the Carthaginians, colonization by the ancient Greeks, and an only slightly longer occupation by the Etruscans, it was incorporated by the Roman Republic at the end of the First Punic War and, with Sardinia, in 260 BC became a province of the Roman Republic. The Romans, who built a colony in Aleria, considered Corsica as one of the most backward regions of the Roman world. The island produced sheep, honey, resin and wax, and exported many slaves, not well considered because of their fierce and rebellious character. Moreover, it was known for its cheap wines, exported to Rome, and was used as place of relegation. One of the most famous exiles being the Roman philosopher Seneca. During the diffusion of Christianity, which arrived quite early from Rome and the Tuscan harbors, Corsica was home to many martyrs and saints. Among them, the most important are Saint Devota and Saint Julia, both patrons of the island. Corsica was integrated by Emperor Diocletian in Roman Italy. Middle Ages and Modern Age. In the 5th century, the western half of the Roman Empire collapsed, and the island was invaded by the Vandals and the Ostrogoths. Briefly recovered by the Byzantines, it soon became part of the Kingdom of the Lombards. This made it dependent from the March of Tuscany, which used it as outpost against the Saracens. Pepin the Short, king of the Franks and Charlemagne's father, expelled these and the Lombards and nominally granted Corsica to Pope Stephen II. In the first quarter of the 11th century, Pisa and Genoa together freed the island from the Arab danger. After that, the island came under the influence of the Republic of Pisa. To this period belong the many polychrome churches which adorn the island, and in that time Corsica experienced a massive immigration from Tuscany, which gave to the island its present toponymy and rendered the language spoken in the northern two-thirds of the island very close to the Tuscan language. Due to that, then began also the traditional division of Corsica in two parts. Along the main chain of mountains roughly going from Calvi to Porto Vecchio, the eastern Banda di Dentro, or Sismonte, more populated, evolved and open to the commerce with Italy, and the western Banda di Fuori, or Pomonte, almost deserted, wild and remote. The crushing defeat experienced by Pisa in 1284 in the Battle of Meloria against Genoa had among its consequences the end of the Pisan rule and the beginning of the Genoese influence. This was contested at the beginning by the King of Aragon, who in 1296 had received from the Pope the investiture over Sardinia and Corsica. A popular revolution against this and the feudal lords, led by Sambucusio de Lando, got the aid of Genoa. After that, the Cismonte was ruled as a league of communion churches, after the Italian experience. The following 150 years were a period of conflict, when the Genoese rule was contested by Aragon, the local lords, the Comuni and the Pope. Finally, in 1450 Genoa ceded the administration of the island to its main bank, the Bank of St. George, which brought peace. In the 16th century, the island entered into the fight between Spain and France for the supremacy in Italy. In 1553, a Franco-Ottoman fleet occupied Corsica, but the reaction of Spain and Genoa, led by Andrea Doria, re-established the Genoese supremacy on the island, confirmed by the Peace of Cato Cambrasi. The unlucky protagonist of this episode was Sampiero di Bastelica, who would later come to be considered a hero of the island. Their power reinstated, the Genoese did not allow the Corsican nobility to share in the government of the island, and oppressed the inhabitants with a heavy tax burden. On the other hand, they introduced on a large scale the chestnut tree, improving the diet of the population, and built a chain of towers along the coast to defend Corsica from the attacks of the Barbary pirates from North Africa. The period of peace lasted until 1729, when the refusal to pay the taxes by a peasant sparked the general insurrection of the island against Genoa. Struggle for independence and French annexation. In 1729, the Corsican Revolution for Independence began, first led by Luigi Giaffari and Giacinta Paoli, later by the son of the latter, Pasquale. After 26 years of struggle against the Republic of Genoa, the independent Corsican Republic was proclaimed in 1755 under the leadership of Pasquale Paoli and remained sovereign until 1769, when the island was conquered by France. The first Corsican constitution was written in Italian by Paoli. The Corsican Republic was unable to eject the Genoese from the major coastal fortresses. After the Corsican conquest of Capraia, a small island of the Tuscan archipelago, in 1767, the Republic of Genoa, exhausted by 40 years of fight, decided to sell the island to France, which, after its defeat in the 7 Years' War, was trying to reinforce its position in the Mediterranean. And in 1768, with the Treaty of Versailles, the Republic ceded all its rights on the island. After an initial successful resistance culminating with the victory at Borgo, the Corsican Republic was crushed by a large French army led by the Count of Arques at the Battle of Pont-Novu. This marked the end of Corsican sovereignty. Despite triggering the Corsican crisis in Britain, whose government gave secret aid, no foreign military support came for the Corsicans. However, nationalist feelings still ran high. Despite the conquest, Corsica was not incorporated into the French state until 1789. Following the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, Pasquale Paoli was able to return to Corsica from exile in Britain. In 1794 he invited British forces under Lord Hood to intervene to free Corsica from French rule. Anglo-Corsican forces drove the French from the island and established an Anglo-Corsican kingdom. Following Spain's entry into the war, the British decided to withdraw from Corsica in 1796. Corsica then returned to French rule. Corsica in the 19th century, despite being the birthplace of the emperor, who had supported Paoli in his youth, the island was neglected by Napoleon's government. In 1814, near the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Corsica was briefly occupied again by British troops. The Treaty of Bastia gave the British Crown sovereignty over the island. but it was later repudiated by Lord Castlereagh, who insisted that the island should be returned to a restored French monarchy. After the Restoration, the island was further neglected by the French state. Despite the presence of a middle class in Bastia and Ajaccio, Corsica remained an otherwise primitive place, whose economy consisted mainly of a subsistence agriculture, and whose population constituted a pastoral society, dominated by clans and the rules of vendetta. The Code of Vendetta required Corsicans to seek deadly revenge for offences against their family's honour. Between 1821 and 1852, no fewer than 4,300 murders were perpetrated in Corsica. In this period was born the myth, created by writers like Mary May and Gregorovius, of Corsica as an Arcadian society, inhabited by fierce and loyal people. During the first half of the century, the people of Corsica belonged still to the Italian cultural world. The bourgeoisie sent children to Pisa to study. Official acts were redacted in Italian and most of the books were printed in Italian. Moreover, many islanders sympathized with the national struggle which was taking place in nearby Italy in those years. Several political refugees from the peninsula, like Niccolò Tommasio, spent years in the island, while some Corsicans like Count Leonetto Cipriani took active part in the fights for Italian independence. Despite all that, during those years the Corsicans began to feel a stronger and stronger attraction to France. The reasons for that are manifold. The knowledge of the French language, which thanks to the mandatory primary schools started to penetrate among the local youth, the high prestige of the French culture, the awareness of being part of a big, powerful state, the possibility of well-paid jobs as civil servants, both in the island, in the mainland and in the colonies. The prospect of serving the French army during the wars for the conquest of the colonial empire, the introduction of steamboats, which reduced the travel time between mainland France from the island drastically, and, last but not least, Napoleon himself, whose existence alone constituted an indissoluble link between France and Corsica. Thanks to all these factors, by around 1870 Corsica had landed in the French cultural world. Modern Corsica paid a high price for the French victory in the First World War. Agriculture was disrupted by the years-long absence of almost all of the young workers, and the percentage of dead or wounded Corsicans in the conflict was double that of those from metropolitan France. Moreover, the protectionist policies of the French government, started in the 1880s and never stopped, had ruined the Corsican export of wine and olive oil, and forced many young Corsicans to emigrate to mainland France or to the Americas. As reaction to these conditions, a nationalist movement was born in the 1920s around the newspaper A Mouvre, having as its objective the autonomy of the island from France. In the 1930s, many exponents of this movement became irredentist, seeing as the only solution to the problems of the island annexation to fascist Italy, which under Benito Mussolini had become one of the main goals of Italy's imperialist policy. After the collapse of France to the German Wehrmacht in 1940, Corsica came under the rule of the Vichy French regime, which was collaborating with the Nazis. In November 1942, the island, following the Anglo-American landings in North Africa, was occupied by Italian and German forces. After the Italian armistice in September 1943, Italian and Free French forces pushed the Germans out of the island, making Corsica the first French department to be freed. Subsequently, the U.S. military established 17 airfields, nicknamed US Corsica, which served as bases for attacks on targets in German-occupied Italy. During the May 1958 crisis, French paratroopers landed on Corsica on the 24th of May, garrisoning the French island in a bloodless action called Operation Corse between the late 50s and the 70s. The project of building a nuclear polygon in the mines of Argentella, the immigration of 18,000 former settlers from Algeria in the eastern plains, and continuing chemical pollution from mainland Italy increased tensions between the autochthonous inhabitants and the French government. Tensions escalated until an armed police assault on a Pied Noirs-owned wine cellar in an area occupied by Corsican nationalists on 23 August 1975. This marked the beginning of the armed nationalist struggle against the French government. Ever since, Corsican nationalism has been a feature of the island's politics, with calls for greater autonomy and protection for Corsican culture and the Corsican language. Periodic flare-ups of raids and killings culminated in the assassination of Prefect Claude Erignac in 1998. In 2013, Corsica hosted the first 3 stages of the 100th Tour de France, which passed through the island for the first time in the event's 110-year history. Geography. Corsica was formed approximately 250 million years ago with the uplift of a granite backbone on the western side. About 50 million years ago, sedimentary rock was pressed against this granite, forming the schists of the eastern side. It is the most mountainous island in the Mediterranean, a mountain in the sea. It is also the 4th largest island in the Mediterranean, after Sicily, Sardinia and Cyprus. It is 183 kilometers long at longest, 83 kilometers wide at widest, has 1,000 kilometers of coastline, more than 200 beaches, and is very mountainous, with Monte Cinto as the highest peak at 2,706 meters and 20 other summits of more than 2,000 meters. Mountains comprise 2/3 of the island, forming a single chain. Forests make up 20% of the island. Approximately 3,500 square kilometers of the total surface area of 8,680 square kilometers is dedicated to nature reserves, mainly in the interior. Corsica contains the GR20, one of Europe's most notable hiking trails. The island is 90 kilometers from Tuscany in Italy and 170 kilometers from the Côte d'Azur in France. It is separated from Sardinia to the south by the Strait of Bonifacio, a minimum of 11 kilometers wide. Major communities. In 2005, the population of Corsica was settled in approximately 360 communities. Climate under Köppen climate classification. Hot summer Mediterranean climate. Ecology. Zones by altitude. The island is divided into 3 major ecological zones by altitude. Below 600 meters is the coastal zone, which features a Mediterranean climate, with hot, dry summers and mild, rainy winters. The natural vegetation is Mediterranean forests, woodlands, and shrubs. The coastal lowlands are part of the Tyrrhenian-Adriatic sclerophyllous and mixed forest ecoregion, in which forests and woodlands of evergreen sclerophyll oaks predominate, chiefly holm oak and cork oak. Much of the coastal lowlands have been cleared for agriculture, grazing and logging, which have reduced the forests considerably. There is considerable bird life in Corsica. In some cases, Corsica is a delimited part of the species range. For example, the subspecies of hooded crow, Corvus cornix ssp cornix, occurs in Corsica, but no further south. From 600 to 1,800 meters is a temperate montane zone. The mountains are cooler and wetter, and home to the Corsican montane broadleaf and mixed forest ecoregion, which supports diverse forests of oak, pine, and broadleaf deciduous trees, with vegetation more typical of northern Europe. The population lives predominantly below 900 meters, with only shepherds and hikers at 600 to 900 meters. From 1,800 to 2,700 meters is a high alpine zone. Vegetation is sparse. This zone is uninhabited. Zones by region. Parc Naturel Regional de Corse. The island has a natural park, which protects rare animal and plant species. The park was created in 1972 and includes the Golf de Porto, the Scandola Nature Reserve, and some of the highest mountains on the island. Scandola cannot be reached on foot, but people can gain access by boat from the village of Galleria and Porto. Two endangered subspecies of hoofed mammals, the mouflon and Corsican red deer, inhabit the park. The Corsican red deer was reintroduced after it was extinct due to overhunting. This Corsican subspecies was the same that survived on Sardinia, so it's endemic. There are other species endemic to Corsica, especially in the upper mountain ranges, i.e., Corsican nuthatch, Corsican fire salamander and Corsican brook salamander, and many plant subspecies. Extinct animals. Corsica, like all the other Mediterranean islands, was home to indigenous animals of the Pleistocene, some endemic to it and some to it in Sardinia. After the proliferation of humans in the Mesolithic, these began to disappear, partly from extinction of the species, and partly from eradication only in Corsica. However, it is now known that many species managed to survive the Mesolithic, and many were still present well into recorded history. The globally extinct species are the Sardinian dhole, Megaloceros catsioti, Corsican giant shrew, Tyrrhenian mole, Sardinian picker, Corsican Sardinian vole, Corsican Sardinian wood mouse, Bubo insularis and Athenangelus. Birds were especially hard hit. Some that were eradicated from the vicinity are Haleritus albicula and Aquila, Heliaca. Demographics. Corsica has a population of 322,120 inhabitants. At the 2011 census, 56.3% of the inhabitants of Corsica were natives of Corsica, 28.6% were natives of continental France, 0.3% were natives of overseas France, and 14.8% were natives of foreign countries. The majority of the foreign immigrants in Corsica come from the Maghreb, and from southern Europe, and Italians.